We've got Pat from Indianapolis, and we're going to talk about using iNaturalist on the computer, but we're also going to talk about how to use iNaturalist on the phone as well. So let's jump right in and whip through some of these slides, and then we'll have some time for questions, and I'll demo the website and what you can do on the website as well. So at the onset, I want to recognize Richard Smart from the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. Some of the slides that I'm going to be using in the presentation, I borrowed from a presentation that he put together. And I also want to recognize that this lovely picture on this first slide here is one of his. Click on the right thing here. So I am Amanda Wanless, and I am the Executive Director of Indiana Phenology, and I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what Indiana Phenology as an organization is, what we do, and what we're looking to do, and then we'll jump into iNaturalist. So our name has phenology in the name, and phenology is really all about seasonal changes in plants and animals. So Indiana Phenology is a small local nonprofit that we've been working on projects since 2017, but we've been a nonprofit since 2019, and we're focused on documenting the timing of seasonal changes of plants and animals in Indiana. And that explains our somewhat unimaginative name, but it captures really what we do pretty well. So we want to understand the relationships between species and the weather and climate and other environmental factors. And we want to understand the places that we live in and how what we do impacts the environment around us. And we want to be able to document the trends from one end of the state to another and how things are changing over time. And I think phenology is fascinating. It does have some practical management applications. And as the quote on this slide indicates, it's really one of the best ways, quickest, simplest ways to see the impacts of climate change. We're a small organization, we're all volunteer, but we're working on expanding. And we have a reach of all the way across the state, and we have volunteer observers in just about every corner of Indiana. And our mission really is to engage Hoosiers of all ages in collecting phenology data and increasing environmental knowledge and awareness, and using the data that we collect to support science-based environmental policy and stewardship. We have about 45 different observation sites across 28 different counties in Indiana. We'd love to have observers in all 92 counties. We have college interns that we work with, and as an organization, we've collected 184,000 phenology status data points since 2019, which is a sizable number. We do environmental education programming. We facilitate citizen science phenology observation through programs like this one, and we collaborate with community partners. So we have 3 different programs. And basically, they all are engaging different audiences in phenology data collection. So we have our Backyard Observers program for individuals and families that want to document phenology on private lands like backyards or nearby natural areas. We have our schoolyard program where we engage teachers in helping their students collect phenology data at their school. And we have a partner program, our Phenology Trail program, where we help nature centers or nature preserves, parks, similar organizations to set up and maintain phenology observation sites on their properties. And each of our trail partners have unique ways that they implement this at their sites. So we have 2 different citizen science data collection programs that we use. One is Nature's Notebook, which is designed to collect long-term phenology data over time. And we also use iNaturalist, which we're going to really dig into today. Just as a contrast between these 2 platforms, Nature's Notebook is a more in-depth platform. It's designed to document change over time. And so it really is focused on repeated observations of the same thing. So like this tree here is a lovely tulip tree at Holiday Park. And we go back almost every week and observe and document what's happening at this particular tree over time. And we use Nature's Notebook as the platform to collect those observations. The cool thing about Nature's Notebook is that it has some standardized scientific protocols for collecting this data and some phenophase definitions, which are just definitions of different life cycle stages of a plant or animal. And all of the data collected through Nature's Notebook is available in a phenology database. iNaturalist, on the other hand, is, as they like to describe it, a social network for naturalists and scientists. So you record your observations, you share that with other naturalist people on the platform, and then there's a means for discussing your findings and communicating with other observers. So it's a different platform, it's fun, and the cool thing about iNaturalist is really that engagement piece, and that you can share photos and have people help you identify things, and it's a lot of fun. So iNaturalist, you can download their free mobile app, and you can do pretty much everything through an app on a smartphone or other device like that. It also has a website, that internet-based platform and portal where you can do things, and it looks different than the app, which is not surprising, but you can do pretty much the same things through either platform. So let's take a look at this. Is like a typical observation on iNaturalist. So basically, this is one that I put up yesterday when I was out in my yard doing some weeding, and it has a picture. Let's see, over here on the left, it's got that picture. And it has some notes, if there are notes. Let's see if I can get a laser pointer here. So it's got a notes section if anyone put notes in there, and this one was growing in my suburban yard. And then it's got a location where that observation was made. And in iNaturalist, you can choose how much you want to share the specific location of where you observed something. You can obscure the location a little bit so that, for instance, somebody can't, go to your specific yard and see exactly where something is. So that's one option you can have in iNaturalist. Then the second panel right here, if you click on this little thing right here, this is really that part of iNaturalist where you can share and discuss and communicate with other people. So we've got my ID right here of what this was. And then you see down here that another iNaturalist participant in the community said, yes, I agree that that's what it is. So you can add comments and talk to each other that way. You can also suggest IDs. And then the third thing you can do here on a typical observation is this stage where you can, say that you really like this observation and star that one. So this is kind of the basic of all the different features: the recording, the sharing, and discussing. There are a couple of activities that I want to talk about today, and skills, I guess we could call them, that I want to train you on in using iNaturalist. And those are making observations yourself, adding identifications to what other people have observed, and then adding annotations to observations. So let's start with making observations. I've got a few slides here of what it looks like to make observations through the app. And if we have time at the end, I'll show you how you would do that through the computer, because it's slightly different where those different buttons you click are. So you would first log in to iNaturalist. You have to download that app. You have to create an account, log in. But once you're in, there are two different ways that you can add observations. And it has this main screen is what typically comes up first. It's just your observations page. And you can see some of the observations that I made recently. And then there's this little plus button, and you would click on that. and that would be to make a new observation. Alternatively, you can click up on these 3 lines right there on that menu, and that's what that menu looks like when you click on it. And down at the bottom, there's a plus and add a new observation. So either one of those buttons will pop up the new observation screen, which looks like this right here. And you can either take a photo, you can choose an image that you've previously taken, or you can do it with no image. You can also record sound. So if you are using iNaturalist to document bird sounds or birds that are in the area, you can record the sound of that bird, and that becomes your observation. So you can either record it, or you can choose a recording that you may already have on your phone. And typically, I like to use the app, and I will take a photo. So that's the observation that I choose. And I take that, within the app. And then once you've made your choice, that pops up this screen right here. And so you see that first picture that I took. And then if you click this right here, this camera button, you can take a second picture or a third, as many as you want to include. Then you can add an identification if you want. You can leave that blank if you want. Often when I'm out on a hike and I am making many observations, I will leave that blank just because it's quicker. And sometimes my phone is a little slow and the connection is slow. And then I'll leave it blank, and then I'll come back later and I'll put in my observations. If you click on that right there, iNaturalist is pretty awesome in that it'll suggest an ID. It'll take the picture that you took and compare it with what it has in its database, all the other pictures other people have taken, to see what your picture looks the most similar to. And it'll suggest an ID, and you can either click that or something else. I've found that it is pretty accurate most of the time. Usually I know what it is that I'm trying to observe, but if I don't, it's kind of fun to have it help you that way. You can add any notes there. And if you have it set up so that iNaturalist can have access to your location information and your date information, it'll fill those in automatically. If you don't give it that location access, then you could click on this portion right here and then manually select where you are making that observation on a map. And then here's that place where you tell it whether you want the location to be really precise or be obscured a little bit. And I typically leave those open because I'm not observing anything rare or anything that I'm worried about people knowing the location about. And then this next section, when you're making an observation, you can click on whether it's captive or cultivated. So if you planted it or somebody else planted it or something like that, you would want to click this button. And the point of having that is that it helps scientists, people that are using this data, to know whether it has natural conditions or whether somebody's taking care of it, watering it, feeding it, whatnot like that. So you can click that button. You can also add it to projects. I'm not really going to talk much about that. We do have our schoolyard iNaturalist project. And so if people are making observations on a school grounds somewhere in Indiana, then they can click add to a project, and you can find that project through a list, and then it'll add that observation to our project. And once you've made all of your choices there, you've put in all that data, you click the check mark, and you've made an observation. It's pretty easy, pretty user-friendly, but let's talk a little bit more about what you might want to make observations of. So iNaturalist, in its name, it's designed for things out in nature. It's not so much designed for pets. It's not designed for indoor house plants. We're looking for living things that you would find outside. Now, you can to some degree include garden plants, but you'll want to check that they're cultivated. You can make observations of insects, snakes, squirrels, mushrooms, weeds, whatever. I am a plant person, so most of what I observe are plants or things I find on the plants that I am observing. Plants are a really great type of organism to start with because you can take good photographs of them because they stay still. They're not as hard as birds, for instance, which will fly away if you get too close to them or disturb them. So plants are a good place to start. Animals, snakes, those things are harder. And you can also take photographs of evidence of organisms. So I like to take pictures of like the nuts or the seeds or fruits that have fallen off of a tree. Often when I'm hiking through the woods, I first notice that I am near a particular type of tree by what I see at my feet. So like I'm walking down and there are a bunch of black walnuts at my feet, then I know to look up and find that tree nearby. So you can take pictures of those as well, and that can be an observation. The same thing with animals. You can take pictures of fur, feather, tracks that you find. What you're not going to want to photograph are people. They very much discourage having photos of people. It's okay to have a hand or a foot in your image. Often you will want to put a hand in your image, kind of to give it a sense of scale. That's totally okay, but photos of people, selfies, faces, avoid those. And again, indoor plants, that's not what we're wanting. Zoo animals, pets, those kinds of things. This is really living creatures that are wild. All right, so quickly, let's go through some tips on how to make good observations, because the photographs are really one of the things that make iNaturalist such a great platform. And if you take really awful photographs, you can't ID those things that you're making observations of, and your observations aren't of much use to anyone else. So a couple of tips here. You really want to capture the moment, some action, especially if you are observing animals and things like that. You want to make sure you get that focus right, take things at different angles, and we'll go through each of these. So here is an observation of a lizard, and they took a picture of everything that's going on. This is not a very good example of what you would want to take. So you can zoom in a little bit closer. You can start to see where that lizard is in that picture. You can get even closer still. And even this is really the best. So you want to get as close as you can to that. With animals, you want to be careful that you're not disturbing them or invading their space, but you can use that zoom feature of your camera. Another thing is to really be mindful of your focus. And depending on what kind of camera you're using, this is more challenging than with other cameras. I have a camera on my new phone that really likes to do what we have in this picture over here. I'll think I have it focused, I'll click that button to take that picture, and it's focused on the background and not what I want. One thing that you can do is you can put your hand behind that plant or that picture, that thing you're trying to focus on. You can get a white piece of paper or black piece of paper and stick that behind it to help it focus on the right thing. Again, here's another picture of getting the focus in the right place. It's on that animal and not on the landscape around it. Another thing you want to pay attention to is taking photos of different angles. So you might look at the front, the back, the side, underneath, on top. So with plants, you will probably want to zoom in on various different features, maybe the leaves, the bark, the flowers, and you want to take pictures of all of the relevant features that would help ID that object. because people that are helping you come up with an ID or corroborating your ID only have the photo to go on. They don't have the benefit that you would have had of seeing it in person. So you have to make sure that you take pictures of all of the relevant features that would make it so that you can make a positive ID of something. Again, here's another example of taking photos from different angles. You've got the bottom of the slug, the side, you get the top there. It also pays to know your camera, to be familiar with your camera. Some camera tips. These are really basic, but it pays you well if you follow these basics. Hold your device still, get close, but not too close, and focus on just one organism as much as you can. Some useful tools that you might want to take with you are a black or white paper, like I mentioned, to help with the focus, to use as a background. If you are wanting to observe insects, a plastic spoon might be helpful to take with you for temporarily holding up those insects so you can get a good picture of them. A ruler to use as a scale in the photos is something that can be helpful. And my personal favorite tool right here is this macro lens that I clip onto my phone, and I hook it onto the side when I'm taking, when I'm using the device, and then when I'm taking that picture, I clip it up on the camera. And it's really handy to be able to take close-up macro photos and the whole picture of the organism at the same time. You can get a good macro lens for a smart device for not a whole lot of money. I think this one cost $30 or $40. All right, so where do you want to look for wildlife? I suspect that you guys don't have any problems figuring out where to find wildlife. But looking at habitat, where they have food, water, shelter, especially if you're interested in animals and birds, you want to look up and look down all around you. And I would challenge you guys to, as you are first using iNaturalist, see how many different types of organisms you can find in the small space of right where you live. So if you go in my yard, yesterday I counted, without even trying very hard, that I had 45 different species in just off of my front porch that I could see from my front porch. And iNaturalist is really great at capturing biodiversity. And don't overlook those weeds that are in the cracks on the sidewalk. Don't overlook those ants. Really, you can make observations of all types of living creatures. And then one final note on making observations. We don't have these lovely bears here in our area, but really do be cognizant of your surroundings and consider safety when you are making observations with iNaturalist or just nature in general. I can tell you that even observing plants can be dangerous. If the tree that I mentioned at Holiday Park, there is a giant rock that's right in the walkway right nearby it. And if you're not careful when you're taking a picture of a big tree, you could trip over other things. So watch your feet, watch for other animals, and pay attention to protecting the spaces for the living creatures whose habitat you are visiting. All right, that is the end of my slide set. So give me a moment here to switch over to showing you what it looks like by using the website and show you some additional things there. All right. So now I'd like to walk you through what the website looks like and how you would do different things in the website, but also talk about making identifications and making annotations. So this is the main home page, I guess you could call it, of iNaturalist once you are in iNaturalist. It has a bunch of tabs up along here. And it has down here those observations that you've made. They've got a forum, so you can have conversations with people, and you can go to your profile. You can tell people about who you are. You can see that I haven't really told anybody who I am. And then you can go to your observations. You can also get to your observations along these different tabs up here. If you hit explore, that'll give you all of the recent observations. You can see this observation right here at the top that was made not too long ago. You can see, you can click along here at see the different species that have been observed. You can see who has been making identifications of different species, and then you can see all of the different people that have made observations, all of the observers. You can also use this section right here to filter through those observations. You can put in a species, you can put in a particular location, you can click on filters, and you have a whole bunch of other options. So this is everybody's observations throughout all of iNaturalist. If you click on your observations, that gives you just the observations you've made. You can see that I've made 1,512 observations. I've observed 359 different species, and you can see some of those here. So one thing that you can do after you've made your own observations is that you can explore other people's observations, and you can help them identify what they have observed. Now, if you look down here, you'll see that there are a couple that say unknown. And that's because while I was observing, I didn't click anything in that box to say I wanted to or to identify it. So one thing that you can do really easily through the website is add identifications. So I'm going to show you how to add identifications or find identifications using filters. So I'm going to filter this for, well, I'm going to go to this button. So if you look here, there are different categories, these icons here. This leaf with a question mark on it that's kind of got a little dashed outline, that is the symbol for an unknown observation. So I'm going to click on that and have this show me all of the unknown observations that I've made. Because I'm in my observations, it's filtered to just show mine. You can also see that it's filtered to just show my observations right here on person. If I were to click on that X, then it would show me all the unknown observations for anyone. So if you want to add observations, you can filter for those unknown ones, and you can click on them. So I clicked on this observation, and then in this button right here, the activity, you can make a comment or suggest an identification. So I'm going to suggest an identification. This one, if you click there, it gives you suggestions. They're pretty sure that it is linden in that genus, and I definitely agree. And I'm going to just call this one a linden, just do it that much. So then you click done, and there it is. I made that ID. Somebody else could suggest a different one. We're going to go back. And again, you can go down, find other things that you might be familiar with. Now, when it says unknown, that makes it hard for other people to find, unless they are specifically looking for unknown things. So one thing that's helpful to do, even if you don't know what something is to give a high level observation. So this one right here will do, for instance, you may not know what this is, but you are, I'm sure, pretty able to say that this is a plant. So you can suggest that as an ID. And so for that, you could type in plants and you could do plants. And then what that does is it makes it so that this observation pops up when somebody filters. So let's go back to our filters, filters it to show all the plants. And so now somebody who's looking to add identifications to plants would see that observation pop up. Whereas if I hadn't added plants to it, nobody would see that way. All right. I think that is most of what I want to say about making observation or identifying things. But there's another way that you can identify things or find things to identify, and that's using this identify tab up here. So if you click on that, again, it's got this filter section right here, and it brings up a whole bunch of observations. And this is a screen where you can quickly go through and make observations. So I'm going to put some filters on here. I'm going to filter it for plants. I'm going to filter it for Indiana because I know Indiana plants a whole lot better than I know Australian plants, for instance. So here we have these filtered by plants and Indiana plants observations. And so we can look down through these and see things that we can agree with. So this one, that looks a lot like basswood to me. And you would look at all the features and see if you agree with that ID. And I do agree with that ID, so I can check that button. And now I have added my identification to that. So you can see right down here that I suggested an ID and that I've agreed to it. So one thing about iNaturalist is that they have something called the community taxon. And that is when 2 or more people have agreed that this observation has a specific, is of a specific species or whatever its observation level is. And so now by adding that observation, I have helped this reach that level of agreement of what this observation is. And that makes it become research grade observation versus a casual grade observation. So now this observation is more likely to be used by researchers who are using iNaturalist data. So you can use this identify tab to add your identifications to things if you're comfortable with making identifications. And what I like to do is I like to go through and look at it for things that I may have recently been observing so that I know that I'm confident in that observation. See, here's another one that definitely is a tulip tree. I know that. So I'm going to click on agree. And now there are two users that have agreed that this is a tulip tree observation. And so if you make observations, that's great, but it's also beneficial for you to participate in iNaturalist by adding identifications to other people's observations. But some tips on that. So let's look at this one right here. So here's that picture of that. I know that this is rubus, but I don't know common dewberry. This is not something that I have a lot of experience with. So I'm not going to add an ID or agree because I don't have enough information myself to say that that is the ID. So you don't want to just go in and click agree, agree, agree to everybody's observations unless you are confident that that is what an observation is of. All right, so you can make observations, you can identify observations. A third thing that you can do in iNaturalist is add annotations. And so I'm going to take us back over to my observations tab, and we're going to look at this butterweed observation. And there are two different ways that iNaturalist observations can be annotated. There is a specific section down here called annotations, and they have a plant phenology annotation and a sex annotation. And then a second way that you can annotate things is using the tags or the observation fields. So let's annotate this for using the annotation section. So if we annotate this with plant phenology, we can say, do we see flower budding? Do we see flowering? Do we see fruiting? Or no evidence of flowering? So I definitely see flowering on this. And I click that, and now I have annotated that with some plant phenology annotation. And the benefit of adding annotations is that it makes it so that researchers can pull out observations with particular features. So without physically annotating it to say it's flowering and then pulling a set of data that are annotated to flowering, there's no easy way to pull observations from iNaturalist of everything that was flowering at a given time. So one of the ways that Indiana Phenology utilizes iNaturalist data is by looking at the pictures and collecting data on what was flowering when using these photographic observations. But we can't easily pull that from iNaturalist unless somebody has gone in and added that it was flowering. And so by having you annotate observations in Indiana, that helps make that data more accessible and usable for Indiana Phenology and for the research that we do. And a second way that you can annotate it is by using observation fields. So I mentioned that we use Nature's Notebook, and that Nature's Notebook has some standardized protocols and definitions for phenology monitoring. One thing that we're trying to do at Indiana Phenology is annotate iNaturalist observations so that they are comparable to our Nature's Notebook data. And so to do that, we use these observation fields, right? There are 11 different observation fields that we've created, and all of the ones that we've created have this USA NPN in parentheses at the end of them. So these are the ones that we use, and these ones are showing up right here when I click on the choose a field box, because these are ones that I have used recently. And the way that we use these is that we look at the image up here, what that observation is of, and we use those definitions and those protocols from Nature's Notebook and the USA National Phenology Network, USA NPN. And we use those definitions to answer these questions. So for this particular butterweed, we do see leaves on it. So we clicked on that field. Do you see leaves or needles? And then you can select on here what you see. And yes, we see that. And then you would click add to add that. So one thing that would be really great for people who are using iNaturalist in Indiana is to have people who will add these observation fields and annotate these observations with these different observation fields right here, so that we again can use these observations from iNaturalist in our data analysis. All right, so that is how you annotate. That's how you observe. That's how you identify. And I am going to open it up for questions. So feel free to unmute yourselves, and I'll answer any questions.
Amanda.
Yep.
This is Greg Shaner. Is it possible to retroactively enter data? You know, if you just recorded it in a notebook or something, and can you go back?
Yes, it is. So let me show you how you would do that. So there's this button right here, this upload button, and that is the way that you add observations through the website. So if we click on that, you can choose files and add them. I'm going to add this observation without media just for demonstration purposes, but you would choose your file at this point, what picture, and then you could fill out those different fields here. You would put whatever date it was that you observed it. So if you observed it back in February, you would pick February 15th, whenever you observed it, and then you can put the location in there. And you can scroll this way, you can put in the latitude, or you can search for a location. And then go through and add all of those different things there. And then when you're done, you click submit. I do believe you can add multiple observations at once before you submit them. You can also add different images. All of that you would do using that. Let's go. Wait. Using that upload feature right there. Other questions? Yes, I see someone raise their hand. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Chuck Buter. So I've been using Seek, and it's similar in this. When you take your photos, it looked like you either take a photo from your, say, my iPhoto collection, or you're taking a photo directly through the app itself, correct?
Right, you can do either way.
Now, when I got a new camera, so I upgraded my camera, and now when I'm using Seek, and I'm wondering if the same thing's going to happen with iNaturalist. When I'm using Seek now with my new camera, it never really focuses in on the image as well as my old camera used to. Is there any issues with camera models that, you know, might not, should I always be going through the app? Is that easiest, or grabbing from my photo collection?
So that is a good question. And I think it depends on the different devices that you're using, which features of the camera are available through the iNaturalist app. And what I have found is that with the camera that I've got now, in iNaturalist, it doesn't have all of the features and it doesn't work as well. But what my workaround is that I use that macro lens because I can get those close-up pictures. So if you have trouble with your camera when you're in iNaturalist app, I would use the camera, take the pictures that way, and then add them from your roll of photos after the fact, rather than taking the picture while you're in iNaturalist. It's one of those, you just have to try it with the particular device you're using, and it will vary depending on device and camera that you've got. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. And I have another question. You suggested this is a more social version. Is it a protocol that you have to go back and, you know, thank everybody or anything like that, or once they've made their comments, you move on, it's just understood?
You can thank people if you want, but with thousands of observations that people make, you don't need to go in. They do have, I was reading one of their observation etiquettes articles that they've got. So there are some norms of the community, and you get to know those as you go, but no, you don't have to say thank you every time. But sometimes I will engage when somebody observes something or identified something, and I am curious about what features that they were focusing in on that helped them make that ID, so that I can learn from why they made that ID. So that's one way I will engage, but no, you don't have to.
Okay, but I'll say thank you to you anyhow.
You're welcome. Other questions? So since you mentioned that you have been using Seek and now you're moving over to iNaturalist, I'll just talk a little bit about what the differences between Seek and iNaturalist are. With Seek, you can use it to keep track of what you have observed. It keeps a list, and it also helps you identify things when you take that picture of it. What it doesn't do is share your observations with anyone else. What iNaturalist does is it has that mechanism for sharing what you have observed with everybody else. And that makes it valuable for scientists and valuable for documenting change over time and conditions in the environment. And so if all you are interested in is just, getting that ID of what you're observing, great, Seek will do it for you. But I would recommend that you go that step beyond and make your experience of learning in nature something that you share with everybody else that scientists and others can benefit from as well. Other questions? All right, well then I'll ask you guys some questions. Does iNaturalist seem like something that you want to use? Who's going to go out and use it today?
Maybe not today, but soon.
I find that it is a lot of fun, and it's one of those things that the more I use, the more that I want to use it and spend time in it. I think you'll like it.
Amanda?
Yep.
Can you talk about the schoolyard project?
The schoolyard iNaturalist project?
Yes.
Yes. Let me actually share my screen again, and I can show you that. So if you go to this more button right here, is it on that one? No, it's on community. So on the community tab right there, there are projects, and you can join projects that from all over the world that have a project for various different reasons. But right here, I have recent projects. So I'm going to click on the Indiana Schoolyard Nature Project, and we have 24 observations. We have 21 species. This is something brand new that we just set up. So there aren't as many observations here, but what it is a way for teachers to use iNaturalist at school and have their students share. So you can add observations to it. If you click on this button, you can add your photos, you can put in your identification and the place where you made it. And we also have these 5 different observation fields that people can add that correspond to those ones that I was showing you earlier: leaves, open flowers, fruits, colored leaves, and recent fruit or seed fall. And then you would save the observation. But the hope is that over time, this is a place where students can come and they can see what's on their school ground, compare that to what's on other school grounds. Given that we just barely put this project up, and there's only my kids' school for their observations, this is something over time will become more valuable and more useful to students. But let's see, I think it's cool that you can use iNaturalist and collect that biodiversity data. So I took these images at my child's elementary school, and they have a typical elementary school that's a very manicured grounds. They have not a whole lot of diversity in what they've planted in the landscape, but even so, nature finds a way of popping up in those forgotten corners. And I was able to, in the course of a half hour, just walking by, find 24 or 21 different species that were on their school grounds. And some of those were things that they wanted to have there. Some of them were things that they hoped to avoid, like dandelions and thistles. And it's just a way of connecting students to nature during school hours, because a lot of schools don't have the opportunity to go on field trips all the time, but it brings home the point that there's nature and life and diversity, even in some of our most manicured landscaped spaces.
So right now, this program depends on someone just going to a school and making someone aware of the program and trying to get them hooked.
Yeah, that's definitely how it's going to work. We do have a program or a training program that we do. So we've got, I think, 3 of them scheduled during the summer and early fall with teachers to help train them on how to use this program, how to use Nature's Notebook, and also iNaturalist. But yes, we are always looking for new teachers who want to participate. And as an organization, we really don't just like say, okay, here's something for you, fun to do, but we help them through it and do problem solving, provide them with curriculum and customized resources to participate.
Are you familiar with the Indiana Native Plant Society?
Yes.
Okay. One of their goals is youth education. For years, they've had this Letha's Fund, which is meant to support financially field trips to natural areas, but I think they're also shifting more to exactly what you're talking about, trying to get just kids right in their schoolyards to spend a little time. So I don't know, maybe there's a possible convergence here.
I would love to talk more with
I could
people
put
about
you
that.
in touch with I'm on the board of that group. I could put you in touch with the people particularly interested in youth education.
Sure, that would be great. I would love that.
Okay.
Thank you. So it looks like we're coming up on 1 o'clock. We've got a few more minutes. Any questions, comments, anything else before we close out our course? All right. Then I will just make a few final notes here. I am happy to help you with any troubleshooting that you may need to do. If you have any problems using iNaturalist or questions as you get going, definitely happy to help you through that. You can reach me through email. I believe you have an email from me that you can just reply to that. I'll also send you some follow-up material from today about making annotations, and I'll send something about our schoolyard program, the flyer for that, since there was some interest about that. And later on this fall, I'm going to be doing another iNaturalist training. This is going to be more of an advanced one where we'll dig more into how we make those annotations and what we're going to be using the data for, and in more in depth for that. So if you're interested, make sure you watch out for that to pop up on our on our website, on our events page. And if you aren't yet subscribed to our newsletter or email list, you can go to our website, indianaphenology.org, and subscribe to that list so that you get news or notices about upcoming events that we have. And then one final thing I want to mention is that next Wednesday evening on the 24th, we have a free virtual program webinar that we're putting on where Dr. Park, a researcher at Purdue University, is going to be talking to us about some of the phenology research that he's done using citizen science data and herbarium data and on plants, and what it says about climate change and how phenology is changing. So if you're interested in that, in the follow-up email, I'll have a link to register for that as well.
Good.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something, and have a good afternoon.
Hey, yeah, thank you.
Very good.